We're still hopeful, aren't we? I think it's the most important.
That's definitely how it's come across, actually, more than perhaps I was expecting.
Well, you've got two optimistic people, so...
Yeah, and
oh, cheers.
also,
Welcome to this episode of The Future We Build. Today I'm joined by two ex-heads of sustainability, Robbie Epsom, formerly at CBRE IM, and Emily Hamilton, formerly of Savills Investment Management, and obviously myself previously at the Sal. So this is a bit of a therapy session for the three of us. So we talk about the role of head of sustainability. What does that mean? Are the skills that we have still relevant? And a message to those still in post, and how they can continue the journey. We reflect upon what we're all doing now and how we're going to continue to push from the outside. And we talk about what's needed from leadership in the face of the multiple challenges and uncertainties we face going forward. It's a great session. Let's dive in. So look, thank you both to you, Robbie and Emily, for joining me on The Future We Build. And yeah, welcome to this episode. I'm really looking forward to this episode because, you know, the common denominator here is we're all ex-heads of sustainability. And that's really kind of where I wanted to start, is why are we all ex-heads of sustainability? It all happened, you know, some point last year. And, you know, I've obviously had that time to reflect on it, what it means for me, launching this podcast, you know, and, you know, it's an opportunity, I suppose, to speak to, you know, those in the market and those in the industry to kind of navigate and figure out what is happening. And when I was thinking about my guest list and thinking about, okay, what's the arc of the story I want in my season one, I was like, I really want to have this therapy session where I can sort of speak to, you know, those of us that were doing this role but are not anymore. So look, really glad that we can make it together, and I thought it was great that we could get you both on together. So look, firstly, Robbie, ex-CBRE IM, Head of Sustainability for Europe, and Emily, your Chief Sustainability Officer with your title, right? Yeah, Savills IM. So I'll let you both introduce yourself, basically, with your current title, and then maybe also what your former role was, or former roles were. Robbie, you go first.
Yeah, so, well, Robbie Epsom, we all know each other. I was the EMEA Head of Sustainability at CBRE Investment Management for just nearly 5 years, and their consultant for 2 years before that when I was working at WSP. So I'm sitting at about 18 years or so in sustainability now, 12 as a consultant and 5 plus now as in-house / fractional, as I'm doing now in the sort of
the new word,
investment world. So fractional, yeah, lots of new words which we're all learning over the last 6 months. So I've pivoted, you know, and I think we're going to discuss all the market drivers that are happening. And I think there's probably a longer list of what isn't happening. Sorry, it's easy to discuss what isn't happening rather than kind of what is, because I think it's hugely complex, and it's not just complex for sustainability. I think it's complex in general at the moment, and sustainability, you know, thanks to a lot of the work of people like us, is really integrated into everything now, and so it's starting to feel the same pains as everything else. But I've pivoted into a new model, and we've launched a firm called Carteria Partners, which is effectively a collaboration between 3 people that were doing the same thing, which is fractional work. And really that's looking at, you know, as we transition out of this place where we had full-time heads of sustainability in companies at the very senior C-suite level, and exco and on investment committees, all that sort of thing. How do we shift into a new world where actually that need still exists, it hasn't gone away, but now it's on much more of a fractional basis, i.e. interim, 2 days a week, advising the board, sitting on one of the fund boards, sitting on it as a non-executive director. So really looking at helping to bridge those gaps, capacity build, help with kind of task-orientated pieces, almost sort of guerrilla warfare tactics. It's like you're not in one place, high profile, big voice, you're in lots of places working with lots of different organizations, sort of under the radar. You know, you're there as a fixer, you know, working, and you know, I know Emily's doing a sort of similar thing as well, but it seems to be where we've pivoted to in sustainability. And I don't know what you guys will say, but if I put my hand on heart and said, what do I actually want to do going forwards, it is being able to help people that are really needing the help, but not be limited, and be able to work across many different places, from tech companies to investment managers to, you know, even consultancies. It's really exciting, and you kind of get to spend 100% of your time doing the stuff that really matters, rather than, and this isn't, this is the same in any corporation you're in. With any big fictional entity of a corporation with 10,000, 100,000 people, you have a lot of administration, a lot of discussions, decisions are very complex. Whereas in this world of fractional work, it's really exciting. You can just kind of go, I've got a problem, I can help you solve that, and you can matchmake, get together, start pretty quickly without the complex scopes of works we used to deal with. So that's where I've pivoted. As we'll discuss in a second, these things aren't always this was never the long-term plan, but the market conditions changed, and this seems to be an opportunity, and we'll see where it goes in 2026.
Cool, yeah. I mean, definitely let's come back to the fractional piece, because I think, if that's the trend, anyway, let's come back to that. Emily.
So my former role, I was Chief Sustainability Officer for Savills Investment Management, so that was a global real estate investment management company. But I decided to make the transition because, similar to Robbie, I think I'm coming up to 18 years in sustainability, 14 of those in-house and the rest operating as a consultant. And I was really starting to see that we're losing strategic foresight. And for me, that is a worry. And the reason I could see that across the market is because we're in this control mode at the moment. So real estate and other markets, they're really focused on, we need to bring in capital, we need to pay our staff, we need to do all these things that are very control focused. But where sustainability and innovation operates best is in a create mode. And that's where we were in the mid-noughties to sort of early 2020s, but we've shifted. And I think there's a real worry in this increasingly volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world that if we are not focusing on the create and the control, we're going to be just starting to do tasks, but there's a question of, are they the right tasks? And so what I'm seeking to do, having left Savills IM, is work more with leadership on those strategic questions, and so focus on, do you understand how nature is impacting your supply chain and your business? And so, part of it's fractional, but the other part of it is judgment-based and sort of more advisory.
It's funny, just hearing you say that, because, I mean, by the way, I think 18 years, when does it start? But it's around about 18 years as well. So, we're all kind of roughly, and again, consultancy into in-house roles, although your weighting is probably directly opposite our weighting, which is more consultancy. But yeah, like that, and we were saying it just before, that the nature of I was thinking this, and I was chatting to an old colleague from way back in 2007, 8, 9, and we were literally coming up with some really innovative tools. We were exploring, certainly not just carbon, it was across the whole range of things, but also, to your point, it was very strategic, and often the role of the consultant, as it was going in at board level, or going into an investment meeting, or just as almost like on a fractional basis, of just, okay, this is the sort of pressure point, we're coming here to help and advise you on this particular thing, advising you on that decision, and then the company goes away and makes that decision. And exactly as you say, the transition has been, well, let's hoover up all those people and put them in post, and then with the sort of, I guess, ideology or the thinking behind, well, they're going to be in every meeting room, they're going to help us make that decision every time. But that hasn't happened, right? Well, I guess it's happened in some degree, but it's also, I guess, parallel. And again, we were saying this, is that as markets have matured, and as, particularly in the finance sector, regulations come in and investors have got more mature, and the RFIs and the RFPs and the kind of whole, how do we kind of sort of tabularize this and checkbox this, is that ability to sort of creatively try and think about, what is the problem we're trying to solve here, and how do we creatively solve it, to how do we kind of tell the market, whoever that might be, that what we're doing, and that's a very different skill set.
Definitely. If you look back, I'd say 2017, 2018, there were loads of consultants coming in looking at what that transformation curve looked like, and what do you need to do as a business to get there. And I think we've almost become stuck in the first wave of set the goals and start the implementation, but we're not doing the next wave of what's coming down the line. How do we apply to that? What innovation programs have you got in place to prepare you? AI is a good point, that's one, but there's also things about how do you get more people around emotional intelligence and understanding that. And so I think there's a lot more that we should be doing as businesses than task and check and task and check. And I feel that's where we're sort of stuck at the moment.
And I was thinking about this session, and obviously I sent you some points before, but I was kind of thinking, have we, there's us and there's others, but have we outgrown the role, or has the role outgrown us? And by that I mean, with everything we've just said, the sort of in-house, and that's, in-house real estate investment manager or REIT, whatever, that role and the skill set that's needed, it seems to becoming much more execution focused within the sort of constraints, as you say, of that kind of box that they're trying to execute, rather than perhaps what our initial skill sets, or the idea behind bringing in senior leaders was to come in and challenge and think about strategy and think about the future. It's now much more, and certainly the team that I put together at LaSalle and what's there now is a heavy part of it is execution, technical execution, which is absolutely needed in the context of manage own buildings. You need to figure that out. So, but I guess for me, reflecting was, what does that mean for the likes of the leaders that are trying to think about what's coming down the pipe, and where do we move the market? And maybe to your point, Robbie, it's less about trying to do that within. It's almost like come full circle, go back out and have the opportunity to really kind of see broadly, and then come back in and challenge, I suppose, in the right way.
I mean, we have to acknowledge that sustainability, like any other department now in the real estate world particularly, but other sectors I think are also struggling and have had tricky times for a whole range of factors. You name it, geopolitical issues, the rise of AI, Trump 2.0, we can't ignore that, Europe swinging right, SFDR 2.0, regulation in flux. There's so much uncertainty that teams are having to battle another potentially challenging year, and I think I don't know if it's the 5th year or the 4th year, probably the 5th year in a row for real estate, and so they are having to look at costs, and that's not just headcount. That's the software they're using, the data hardware they're using on site. So there's all sorts of costs, and the reality is we all succeeded. A lot of us went in house. Maybe with the exception of Emily, there was a big transition back in 2019, 2020, where a lot of the investment managers started bringing consultants in-house to take on these sort of heads of sustainability roles. And we've done great work, I think, particularly around the sort of net zero journey of actually operationalizing that and making it a real thing, where money was actually being spent on checking what we need to do, doing decarb audits, starting to implement them. Others, like you guys at Savills, were starting to make great progress into biodiversity as well. And so we got stuff working, which I think is really powerful. But the reality is that sustainability is having to now justify its place in the ecosystem of a corporation. I think it's amazing, actually, if we really reflect back on it, that through 4 to 5 challenging years, sustainability teams were largely protected, as well as were the budgets. But now when you look at a fund's budget, sustainability is a big part of the pie chart. It's there with accountancy costs, legal costs, all those other things. And so now it's having to demonstrate ROI really like a grown-up, which means it's matured. So I think it's exciting. But I think to the point you guys are both discussing around that operational task-oriented role or the strategic leadership, you 100% need both. We should be proud because we got to the point where the guide rails, the methodology, the process has been established where more junior people and teams that aren't sustainability specialists can now get on with this stuff. But you do still need that strategic leadership, but it is expensive. And when you're in a time where there's massive uncertainty, regulations are in flux, half the world is thinking, let's focus on all the other issues we're dealing with right now and maybe just get on with things we know we need to do with sustainability and not worry about the next page. There's a little bit of an in-between period where it might come back, or like the private equity world and others, it might actually evolve into this new way of sustainability being a permanent feature on boards, on committees, as fractional leadership, and it might be a slightly different way of working. I actually think that if you get things right, you don't have to have someone in seat every day of the year. There's other things like, I've worked in many companies where things which are really specific, like, local government pension things, you wouldn't be worth having a full-time employed specialist in that, but you have someone that you can pick up the phone to whenever you need to get some advice or get some strategic steer. Same with doing financial checks for suppliers and stuff. You don't need to have someone full-time, but whenever you've got a big risky supplier, you get them on the phone, you get them in, you do a strategic review. So maybe sustainability is evolving to be that kind of direction. But the best advice I got, to Emily's point, when I I went in house for the first time was keep being a consultant. You are an advisor to that team in house, whether it's the CIO, whether it's the compliance team, legal team. You are a consultant to them, and the role of a consultant, to your point, is to always stay one page ahead of the market. Always have an eye on where things are going next, and that is expensive because you've got to be a thinker that thinks differently, is constantly plugged in out there on the circuit, networking, hearing all the different views, working out which ones need to be taken seriously and explored further. And that's the bit which I think is going through a transition.
I found that. Sorry.
I was going to say, but the role of a consultant is often to please their client, and I think this is where we've almost started to lose that challenging piece. So before, when working in-house, it was an uncomfortable role. A lot of my career, I was there asking the difficult, tricky questions and not always getting positive responses, having to go back and ask the same question before I got a yes, or show different ways of doing things. And I think that is really important from a resilience perspective. And I think this is what I'm slightly concerned now. You have lots of new people who have entered the industry who need to build up that resilience to be able to keep pushing and keep saying, no, we do need to think about this topic, and not just try and please their client, which is ultimately internally the company. And so I think this is something where having as Robbie was saying, a strategic partner, someone operating outside of the company, you're more able to ask those difficult questions than if you're sitting inside the business, because you have to balance both the emotional intelligence of pushing an organisation, but at the same time you need to be able to make sure that your team is well respected as well.
And often with the confidence of, look, I'm out there in the market and this is how others are doing it. Why are you not taking it seriously? Whereas I think when you're in-house, you tend to be part of all the various agendas that you get in a big corporation, which is again is a very normal thing. So you're not just managing the tough feedback, you're managing the, how's this being perceived? Does it look like there's ulterior motives here?
Yes.
And I think being independent actually adds a whole level of integrity because, a lot of us, we do this because we care, we think it's the right thing to do, we pivot when we see things change. So I think to be able to be that independent questioning person, be able to adjust your portfolio as you feel right,
Absolutely.
I think is very powerful.
It's a really interesting point, isn't it? Because, again, sort of looking back, there was an era where, it wasn't us because we weren't, I guess, at that stage, but, perhaps our predecessors, they were in challenging the boards, challenging, the management of these companies, and they were asking those difficult questions. And that's perhaps where we saw some of this creativity and progress. And then, as you say, when bringing that in-house, there's a sort of assumption, we'll have that in-house. But like you say, when you're an employee of a company, you get everything gets wrapped around you as well as like, well, we can say this, we can't say that. Yeah. These are our client types, and also the power politics of like, who are you reporting to? And all that stuff means that, when you're in a boardroom or any kind of meeting, you immediately just have that weight of like, well, how do I play this? And like, what do I want to say versus what do I know that's going to get through? Whereas when you're an outsider or you're an external, you can just come in and go, look guys, stop messing about. That's what you need to do.
Yes.
And that's just a much easier position to be.
Yes.
And I think in a way, and I don't know, it's a good question to perhaps the C-suite of the firms that we've left, did they find that they lost that sort of challenger? When there was this sort of influx of senior people coming in house, did they lose that sort of challenger around the room because ultimately we all sort of became a little bit normalized to what the business, I don't know, be curious to kind of figure out if that actually is.
I think there are still a lot of people in-house in all these organizations, not just at the junior level, but there still remains senior people as well. I think there's definitely been a loss of talent across real asset space, mostly real estate. We're honest, infrastructure firms were less effective because infrastructure has been booming. Every time I'm collaborating or working with infrastructure firm, chatting to ex-colleagues in that space, they are inundated with new funds and positive stuff because of the benefits of things like renewable energy, wind, transport, digital infrastructure, etc. So they've been less effective. But in real estate, there's been a churn, and they've lost a lot of, whether it's upper middle or at the top, that kind of, I'd say 15 to 20 years plus experience, and they've retained a lot of the new job adverts, if you look at things like LinkedIn, are all have the word operational now in the title, head of sustainable operations, sustainable value. It's all stuff like that, which is that task orientated, wanting to really get on with it. Either reporting, but a lot of it's still, I think, working through the decarb audits, because there's a lot of work to do on that sort of side for people. That's working with the asset managers to really get this stuff done. So I think it's good work. What some of them will probably start to find as a bit of a gap is, where it had evolved, and quite a few of the investment managers I think had done this, that sort of executive seat and things like investment committees, because even if you've got a single global person in an organisation, it's very hard for them to be in every single committee. So having a sort of team that was below that, or a team where there were several at the top, allowed you to be in risk committees, investment committees, things like that. So I think that's probably the biggest risk. Are they feeling it? I don't think they probably will at the moment, because I think the world is distracted right now. SFDR is still, you've got all these regulations in flux. You've got this whole, EU omnibus had a grenade thrown at it from right-wing politicians in Europe. There's all sorts of things like that happening, where we're kind of back to the days of, well, why don't we just wait and see how this settles down? Half of the US is split, half really wants to do stuff, the other doesn't. You've got Trump 2.0, back out the Paris Agreement. Everyone's just in this sort of almost in-between bit again, where they're just going, let's just take a breath, get on with the stuff we know we need to do. Like, decarbing makes sense. I think even those that have a issue with net zero get that electrification, etc., is good for assets, particularly in Europe. And so I think they're kind of like, let's, and I think this is what's probably causing some of the green hushing. Let's just keep our heads down a bit, get on with stuff, not make too much noise, and just wait for this period to pass.
But that's the bit that worries me, is that we're in this, let's keep our heads down and let's not make too much noise. If we go back to 2008, when the Climate Act was set, no one knew how we were going to get there, but they still did it. These days, it's all about, you must have a plan, you must achieve your plan. ROI, I think ROI is completely the wrong metric, but maybe we can talk about that later. And we've lost that sense of, let's try and innovate to get there. It's now, we need to know exactly what we're going to do each year in order to do it. And I think that's a dangerous place, because we are not in that world. We're in a world that is volatile, is uncertain, and we need to be able to be much more nimble. So for me, I think we need to go back to, what is it that we want to achieve? How are we going to get there? Have some clear milestones, but be aware that we don't know all the answers. It's leadership. Net zero audits is a great example. We didn't have those, did we, in 2018? Well, we have now created them.
That's a good question, because when we all kind of probably came into post around end of 2000 and between 2018, I suppose, and 2022, there's a lot of net zero targets being set, right? 2050, some a bit sooner. But as you say, probably most of them were set because, well, everyone else is setting them, and Paris has just been signed, and we better set one, and our clients are expecting of us. Did anyone genuinely understand how they were going to get there? No. And definitely didn't know the cost of getting there. But they set them anyway. So I think that leadership, well, not leadership perhaps, but there was a lot of peer pressure.
Yes.
And I wonder, and something I've thought about is, there was that ambition. I think now that we've sort of gone forward 3 or 4 years, we've had the audits, we've had the technical people go out, we've had this, spend the money on figuring out, okay, what's this actually going to cost, and how are we actually going to do this? It's like, okay, this is really hard. And so there's almost, which is back to your point, is like, okay, if we're actually going to see this through, we need to actually, properly figure out how we're going to do this sequentially along the, cycles of the market, and it becomes very technical, and, you've got to sort of empower your asset management team and all of that. So there was an element, I think, of just, we're going to aim for something. But to your point as well, I think, with everything else that's going on in the world, there seems a real reluctance to do that with anything else. Like, we set that target, and now we need to sort of try and get on and sort of try and deliver that quietly. But there's a whole host of other big challenges and issues and things that we need to do, but there doesn't seem to be that ambition, the same level of sort of ambition and noise, and I guess sort of coalition of the willing, as it were, to say we're also going to aim for this. And I was thinking about this. I've been thinking about this a lot, actually. Is like, even just within the context of Europe, like, who would be like, who is like really kind of demonstrating leadership by doing that, like by going, this is what we want to aim for within the sort of broad, I guess, built environment sector. And I guess that's what, in some ways, that's what we need, right? We need people to sort of show the way. And it's difficult when you've got all these other constraints and challenges and things that we know that.
But again, it's quite hard when you're in an organisation in a senior position, shareholders, the works, it's quite difficult to really put your head above the parapet in a way that moves you in a very drastically different place. Not because it's always a bad negative thing to do, but just any change at pace can create uncertainty and hesitation and risk, all that sort of stuff. So another way I think this is actually quite a good thing, the fractional, is that we have the ability to actually help them have those brave conversations, be a bit more candid. But I think we also have to respect. I think on the whole, yes, obviously things could have been better, faster, etc. But I was blown away by the change over the last 5 or so years in the investment management world. Like we went from, talking about net zero and audits, and we felt our way through. Yes, SFDR was a bit of a distraction, but I think a lot of us still leveraged it in a way to, get change moving. And there was some amazing stuff that I could never have believed 5 years ago we would have achieved. And we did that because in large part, a lot of these investment managers actually moved past the why quite quickly and started to move into like, how do we actually do this? So I think there's a lot to be said for, kind of where we've been so far. Where we go next, I'm agreeing with Emily, but also that I can see both sides. I think sustainability now is an adult in the room, and it does need to prove that this isn't all just because we think it's the right thing to do. This is also fundamentally the right thing to do from a business perspective, but you have to also have purpose, because without purpose you don't solve complex problems. No one knew the answer to solving the issues of bacterial infections, and no one knows where AI is going, but we have to imagine all these futures in our head of where it could go, and are we happy with that? Okay, well, how about we try this? And if you don't do that, you don't invent solutions, you don't navigate through complexity. So I think having all these things is powerful. Like net zero, yes, the words become toxic, the politicians have got a hold of it. I actually see that as a positive. If politicians have got a hold of net zero, we've done something right. It's on the radar. But the reality is I don't understand why that isn't just an absolute no-brainer. Because for me as an engineer, as someone whose brain lives in the future, it's just a business fundamental that fossil fuels are a finite resource that are trending in only one direction. Factually, they're going to run out at some point, which means before that they're going to get expensive and there's going to be geopolitical issues. Why would you design any business or building where that is in your future? So that to me is the issue we're trying to solve. And maybe it's now on us in this new world to start going, well, whatever you want to call it, that's the problem we're trying to solve. And then obviously all the other ones, adaptation, biodiversity. But in terms of net zero, that's the simple piece of it.
It's amazing that simple message gets complicated.
I think it is an important message, that net zero piece. But I'd also point to the fact that the UK published, Defra published, the Department of Energy, Rural Food and Affairs published a document that basically said nature is now a strategic national security risk, and not addressing nature.
It's kind of done on a bit under the radar.
It was done. It's 14 pages. I highly recommend reading it. It's a good read.
We'll put the show notes with it.
And to me, this is worrying. We're focusing on net zero. We're saying climate adaptation and biodiversity can come later. And we can't. We've got to see how we link all those back together. And I think that's what sustainability does really powerfully, is being able to make those connections across teams, across departments, across sectors, to be able to say, right, how are we going to tackle this together? And I agree with you, Robbie. I think we've achieved some incredible things the last 5 years. If you look at where we are, when I first joined, we were having debates about whether it was environmental and social governance and how you structured it in a paper. Now it's just included and very detailed net zero audits. So and to extent, focusing on biodiversity and other things. But there is that disconnection, and I think our sector needs to try and spend some time unpicking that and asking why, and looking at how do we get that conversation about biodiversity and nature in the room, because for real estate it's going to have a fundamental impact. Water, land, supply chains, all these different things, and then you put climate adaptation over the top of it, and suddenly you're in a very different scenario that even if your building gets to net zero, if you haven't addressed climate resilience as a starting point, your building's going to be stranded.
Yeah.
And this is what I'm worried about.
Yeah.
Or massive capex risks
Yes.
as well.
Yes.
It's amazing, isn't it? Because when you actually think about all of that and break it down, and I've written part of the joy of portfolio company. You have time to do things like this. I've written, and hopefully will come out in the next couple of months, couple of chapters for 2 different books. So I have some real time to distill my thoughts.
Yeah.
And what I've realised, putting on things like Yuval Harari from, *Sapiens*, I think he talks about this in *Nexus* as well. How he talks about the fiction of corporate entities, like the ultimate fiction of funds. When you actually think about what a fund is, it is literally a story that you're telling investors, and then you're turning that story into a contractual mechanism. And the amazing thing is that finance is also a fiction. And yet, the whole world of finance is driven by the fiction of the financial entities, the funds, the various mechanisms that you can transact on, and the fiction of the finances. And actually, the only thing that really matters, to Emily's point, is can you actually get the water, the energy, the waste out of your asset? These are the real world valuable things where you can almost, technically, obviously you can't in the real world, you could click a button on a computer screen and delete a debt. You can't just magic up water if you run out of water. So the real thing that carries value in all of these systems is the stuff that's real. Kilowatt hours, meters cubed of water. Is the water clean? Can your building survive physical climate changes? If you get that wrong, nothing else sort of matters.
Nothing matters.
But for some reason, that piece of the accounting picture and that piece of the strategic decision-making and long-term planning has always been out of the picture. It's starting to come in, and I genuinely think, I feel hopeful that actually the fossil fuel piece, people understand that now, that actually we are trending towards energy as a service where, the analogy I use is it's going to be like broadband, right? No one really pays for data on the sort of, megabyte anymore. You pay for maybe 20, 30 quid a month and you get unlimited data, and you're paying effectively for the infrastructure and your router. Energy will be there one day.
Yeah.
You'll pay a monthly fee, it'll be fixed. Your car, your house, your heating will all be, whether it's on-site or procured, will just be for a set small fee to contribute towards maintenance. Or they'll even stick it through the council tax, who knows? But it will be free. And that will dramatically change everything. And when you start thinking of it that way, it becomes really exciting. It becomes real world.
Yeah, there's some pain to get there.
Yeah, but it is possible. You both know I retrofitted my home. So I'm basically sitting in an energy positive position. I pay bills for the first 2 months of the year, nothing really for the rest. And so it is possible. I think this return on investment piece is what bothers me, because when you talk about we need to get return on investment, that places what are basically structural improvements. Like when you put solar panels on, you're not just helping your home, you're helping other homes because you're selling back to the grid. There are almost wider than asset benefits that we're not able to account for yet when we do this whole valuation. So when we're saying, we need to have 10 years to get the return on investment, we're only counting what's in the building itself, not on what that building is necessarily doing to the wider area. And if you've got a huge development, like a logistics one, doing those retrofit upgrades could actually catalyse regeneration for the wider area. And I think this is what I struggle with, is we haven't quite figured out how do we take in that wider benefit that the sustainability, if you put it in inverted commas, that's doing. How do you factor that into the valuation? Because if you just do it on a single asset, we are always going to have this struggle to prove the return on investment.
That's an interesting let's go with that. So I guess, do you have any sort of parting wisdom for those of our colleagues, friends, and others that are still in these roles, still in house, still fighting the good fight, with everything that's coming, with all the change that you're seeing, what would you say to them?
For me, I would say first and foremost, listen. Really listen to what your colleagues are saying are their challenges, because I think once we start to listen and understand what they're trying to work towards, it's easier to then help co-create solutions. Whereas if we're coming at it with, we think we've got the answer, actually that might not work for a particular fund for a particular circumstance. So I think listen and really understand what the problem is fundamental as a starting point.
Share the same.
Look, all these things are cyclical. None of us are that old that we've been through multiple cycles, but I think there are cycles, and I have no doubt that the drivers in the market that will cause both opportunities and challenges for major corporates, not just in the finance world, more widely, will 100% come back, and there'll be another whole, oh my God, we've got to upskill, grow teams and stuff. But sustainability is not going away for all the points we've both made. These are the fundamentals of how we all continue to exist as a species into the future. The businesses, continue to survive, but not just survive, but hopefully thrive, right? In good ways, where it's all the things are better: social, biodiversity, cleaner air. I was having a great discussion over lunch with someone, and it's mad that our politicians don't get this, right? But I would be willing to bet that if you got a room of people, together from across the political spectrum, we all want exactly the same thing. 100%. The only thing that changes, and not just sustainability, clean air, clean water, etc., but good healthcare, top schooling. Everyone wants the same thing. The only bit we differ on is how we get there. And I think that's the bit where...
Who provides it.
Exactly. We're missing that. So I think sustainability is going to keep on. I think we're all busy, and I think we found that, already people are starting to reach out. It's a recalibration for those of us who have done consultancy before. This is very different, because I think consultants have their own challenges with the way artificial intelligence is taking on some of the sort of middle and more junior tasks. So it's evolving. But I would say, in my view, people that have really had the ability to change the world have been on this outside fractional sort of journey of doing and charting their own course, because I think it gives you the most important thing, which is that flexibility, where if you come to work like today, I'm meeting all sorts of people, who knows where these conversations are going to take me. And if I see something, I'm like, that door's ajar, and I genuinely think, like, I got invited to 2 things which probably won't be paid, but I think are going to be massively impactful, and I get to be there and be part of that, part of shaping it, because I'm fractional and able to be flexible with my approach. To do that, So I think it's quite powerful, but I think the key message is it hasn't gone away. All these people who are in-house still, junior and senior levels, have got a hugely important job to do. They've got to keep doing it. Who knows where next year is going to go, but they should work with us. I think we should be complementary to each other.
So that's the message.
Can I ask one more?
Come and talk to us. Yes.
Protect your energy as well. I think that's really important at this moment in time.
Yeah. Do you know what? I've read so many articles. I mean, look, it's not hiding anything, right? You just have to look at LinkedIn for a couple of days and realise, how many people with sustainability in their job title are, also have that green thing on their picture which says looking for work, right? There's a lot of people in a lot of sectors that are now, have been let go or are looking for work. And I read so much about the mental health kind of side of it, both of those that are still there or have been there and are effectively burned out, and those that are still in post that are, dealing with like all these issues, and like how do we kind of operate at 2 speeds effectively, satisfying the boss whilst also thinking long term. And as we know, right, these problems just sort of become bigger and bigger and bigger, and we've all been there. So it's the mental load is exhausting, and like you said earlier, right, staying ahead of it. So I've got to stay ahead of it, and I've got to satisfy the now, and and it's another issue coming down the pipe, and I've got to be an expert, and I've got to go and speak at this thing, and it is. Yeah. It's just exhausting, and I know. We all know people I know, but who've sort of got to that point where like I just can't do this anymore. And I've really kind of now I'm sort of probably looking out. Well, I'm out and looking in, and I sort of use LinkedIn as a bit of a barometer. It's incredible the amount of people that are, and there's like therapists that are emerging to really kind of help that, help us. And so it's really interesting, like kind of seeing it with a fresh pair of eyes, I guess.
Yeah. It's a bit of a whammy, isn't it?
But for me, sustainability and impact you're going to bring starts with your own self-awareness, and you can't deliver change unless you are willing to be part of that change. And I think protecting your energy is a really important.
And you can't if you're tired.
Exactly. And Alex, you and I were talking before we started. I've started personal training and just getting back into healthier habits and things like that. I think for too long kind of undervalued how important it is to look after yourself.
You're in a corporate job and you find it difficult to do that.
Yeah.
Whereas you have to sort of go on your own and go, do you know what?
Exactly.
I can go to the gym. I can do
exactly.
Like, okay, hold on, there's something not right there. Like
those 3 hours a day I've taken back from not travelling in, suddenly you can do amazing things with them, take much better dog walks. And I think all of that is really important.
Hopefully that's where people are listening some people are listening anyway, is walking the dog.
Well, she was a big reason why I left, was because I wanted to spend more time with my dog. So
there you go.
But I think the challenge we have is it is more than just a job, isn't it? Like like you've done with your house.
It's passion.
It's passion, which means you do take things more personally if they're not progressing, and you do think about it outside of work because it is your thing, isn't it? We want to change this, we want to fix it.
You can't switch it on and off.
No.
And for me, it's my team as well. I love my team, and I still feel quite protective, even though I've left, because we built something really spectacular. And so I think that's why it's important to protect your energy, because when you're at your best self, everyone else around you can be at their best self.
That's the one thing, clearly, the biggest thing that I miss is just that, the like-minded people and trying to kind of lead a team within that sort of environment. Like you're almost like trying to protect you as a team to sort of navigate through this sort of challenging.
But you must see a new sort of almost fictional entity of our own making emerging. Like all of us who are now operating in this new way, which none of us really knew existed before. Because it is a bit different from the old consultancy model, and AI is definitely playing a place. We're all starting to work together and collaborate, which to me is an incredible knowledge pool, right? You think all the things we've all learned across all these organisations, our consulting days, our experience in-house, now starting to work together in a collaborative way, and we can because we're now effectively peers in a new sort of open source way of working. It's I think there's exciting stuff to come. So it's terrifying, but it's exciting.
It is quite scary sometimes. I've been bad days where you have just terrified versus optimistic, depending on which day of the week it is.
That's where you achieve great things, isn't it? When you're outside your comfort zone.
I think so. It's I genuinely think that it's sustainability. We kind of almost charted a path which was laid out for us in the sense of we did our training, these jobs were created, but this is to see all these sustainability people now charting a course which they think is right based on what they've
now
learned.
It's up to us, right?
I think it's really exciting, and it's yes, the market has created conditions that have meant some of us have had to, others have seen it as an opportunity. There's all sorts of things, but it's high risk, high reward, and in my view, people that have changed history, collaborators, it all comes down to collaborating. And
I mean, look, certainly one of the things I've taken away is that I can now pick and choose. That sounds like I'm not as if I'm turning people away, but I purposely go to the companies that I want to work with. I go to the people that I want to work with. I'm like, I think you're doing something interesting. I think I can help you. Let's have a conversation.
But that really matters because
it's so refreshing.
If you combine,
values driven.
It's so refreshing.
It's values driven. If you combine your skill set and it's integrity, right? So the hope is given the kind of characters we all are in this world, if we're working with someone, people are thinking, wow, if they're working with them, there must be something worth looking at there, because we've obviously looked at that and gone, I think I can add value. I think that's got a good direction to travel, and I think that's really powerful. You're able to help lots of people in very specific ways, but who knows where things are going to go? I think the theme is unpredictability, isn't it?
I mean, seems to be the theme. Maybe it's the theme from here on out, right? It's kind of scary. Right. Last question, which I ask all my guests. It's a bit of a sort of gimmicky question, but bear with me. If you could get one thing done by government, business, or an individual, or both, all three, what would it be? I don't know who wants to go first, but if you can think of something that you would love the government to do, love businesses to do differently, or call out to the listeners individually, what would be the one thing? Put you on the spot.
Mine's
we'll pause that.
Mine's a boring one, but I think boring because I think it's just so fixable. It's just it just takes someone in a leadership position in government just to go, we're going to do this. And it is, if you look at, there are certain models where you can invest as an individual in renewables at industrial scale, and from doing that personally, it costs for a typical 2-bed to 3-bed house probably $2,000 to $4,000 for the rest of your life in terms of paying for some off-site solar, wind.
So the Ripple model.
The Ripple type model. Yeah. And I just love that because it just gives you an actual idea of that energy as a service model of what it costs to actually invest in the CapEx when it's at scale and the maintenance. And for someone in government just to go, we're going to just do this. We're going to give every single person in this country a couple of grand and put it into a model like that.
Right, okay.
And you could literally, for a couple of grand a head, probably make us an energy sovereign country overnight, decouple wholesale gas from the electricity grid completely. And not only would that solve sustainability issues, I genuinely think it would solve so many of our other issues as well around inflation, living costs, everything. People would have more disposable money, etc., etc. I just think that would be one of the most powerful things. And I know it's complicated, I know it's pie in the sky, but that, as a silver bullet, we have the technology, we know that's the answer.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny enough. I did the Ripple thing probably 4 years ago. Unfortunately, they went bust.
They did, but the project survived.
But the project survived, and it's now a co-op, and I'm effectively an investor into that project.
And I love that, because that's in empowering the people to crowdfund our energy infrastructure in a decentralised way. I absolutely love it. And I think that if the government could support every single person in our country to become a co-owner in our grid, I think it's awesome.
I love that.
Yeah. Emily, what's yours?
I think it would be to quadruple at least the amount of investment that we're putting into nature-based solutions, because everything starts with a healthy planet. We're not going to have strong communities or a strong economy unless we've got ourselves in a healthy system. And at the moment, we're in a really unhealthy system. Is that
government or
it's a mixture. Yeah. I think it needs both public and private. And I actually don't think government can just do one thing. I think government need to work with the private sector much more closely on this. But I remember being flabbergasted when I saw that the 500 million was being touted as a fantastic number that was being put in from government for nature-based solutions. I thought, whoa, if just one fund raises that in the real estate sector, that's job done for the government. And so I think the ambition on what we need to do for nature and nature-based solutions just needs to be catastrophically bigger than it currently is.
Which comes back to your point, which I know is your personal journey, is like, I mean, for the government less so, but I think for business it's like, okay, how do I justify that? Like, where's the ROI? Dare I say it? Where's the ROI? How do we avoid that being the blocker? How do we kind of provide the business community with that incentive, which I know is, obviously what you're now going to be sort of channeling your energy towards. So look forward to you.
Thanks. I'll try and solve
convincing all of us and convincing business.
I don't know about you guys, but the first half of my career was awful from a sustainability perspective, because you were in that mode of, you have the door wasn't open, you were convincing, and so I'm just almost so grateful to have had 5 to 8 years where people were keen for our help. And I don't think we've left that. I just think it's going through an evolution, but the whole world is, and sustainability is just
one of those things.
It's just another thing in the room.
I mean, what you were saying earlier, actually, and it's funny. Obviously, AI, you can't escape listening to it, hearing it, whatever. But I wonder whether or not, I don't want to say that saviour. That's the wrong point, the wrong sort of word, but. With obviously the growth of AI and obviously the physical manifestation of AI being data centers, that's now their limiting factor. And so you've got these 4, 5, 6, 7 companies, particularly in the US, driving 40% of the S&P. That's pretty much the only way that the S&P is growing. I think I read something the other day, and if it's like you take those 7 companies out, GDP in America grew by 0.01%. With those 7 companies, it's like 3.5%.
Yeah.
So they have to. That just will be like, we just need to keep pushing that. So the constraint is data centers, which is real estate, and that's energy and that's water, basically, which is and the minerals that go into that. And so in a funny sort of way, we're now seeing, there's good things about and bad things about AI, but we're sort of almost seeing that industry is almost exposing, in a way, the fragility of the supply chain to real estate, which is what we're all sort of talking about. But we've never had this sort of nexus point before where the supply becomes so constrained, and actually with the sort of growth of AI and the speed at which they want to move, that's all become really evident. It's like, okay, these are natural resources, and you just can't get them out of the ground quick enough. You can't move them quick enough. You can't produce. So it'd be really interesting to see kind of what the fallout of that is. And we're already, I guess, seeing a sort of move towards energy sovereignty and obviously the emergence of nuclear and things like that to try and get away from it. But it is interesting. That's perhaps where, I don't know. It'll be interesting how it comes out and whether it does, but whether or not that does sort of help in some way elevate, in a way, the sort of water issue, the minerals issue, the waste issue, the circularity issue is I
hope it does.
We can't move this market quick enough without that. So
I think it's a social impact side for me with
100%.
The particular data centers, because these massive companies do not have to go through the same rigorous processes, do they? They just almost go in and say,
I want that.
And you try and negotiate, and you don't often get very far. So
they tend to position them in places where there's not a huge amount of people. So the sort of
But there's
backlash
some that are on the edge of towns, and often in places where people aren't as wealthy as well.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that is a real worry, is that you start to put in all this infrastructure, places with people who may not have the time or energy to...
There's not that many of them, and they haven't got the financial means to fight it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway.
So...
All right. Thank you. I think we better draw it to a close. Thank you both. That's it for this week's episode of The Future We Build. I want to thank you so much for listening to us wherever you are. If you're navigating these same challenges, from pricing in climate risk, decarbonising buildings, or if you're scaling a new product or solution, join us on LinkedIn. Search for me, Alex Eds, or follow our official page at The Future We Build. That's where we break down these episodes further, discuss the topics and discussions, and connect you to the leaders engaged in this mission. This show and the guests I invite will be influenced by the conversations we have on LinkedIn. So if you have ideas or would like to hear the thoughts of an industry leader, let me know, and I look forward to continuing the conversation with you there. You can find the show notes and full transcripts on our website. And if you found today's session valuable, please hit subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. Thank you for listening. I'm Alex Eds, and I'll see you next time.